Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as we break down the Broncos' win over the Arizona Cardinals 24-15, snapping a 5-game losing streak. Now, Ben, certainly Arizona Cardinals coming into this game 4-9, playing Colt McCoy, eventually Trace McSorley. There's a little bit of an understanding about what the level of team that you were taking on, but make no joke about it, Arizona Cardinals defense was still playing at a high level. They got 7 sacks in the game. I think some of that had to do with the Broncos offensive line, naturally. But the Broncos snapping the 5-game losing streak, seeing just the amount of excitement from that locker room afterwards. This really did mean something, though many people still regard it as a meaningless game, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's meaningless in the standings, but it's not meaningless in the hearts of the players. I mean, those guys were frustrated. They think they've been you're going out there and you think you're doing the right thing and you're putting all these things together, especially defensively, and you find a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory week after week. So I think in the end, I think that they've got that off their back now. And now you can just kind of concentrate again on playing football. And, you've got a winnable game against the Rams coming up on Christmas. I think maybe you get back-to-back wins for the second time this season since Houston, San Francisco. How big was that San Francisco win?
Feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, they were 2-1 at one point this season. I think in that puts you into the Kansas City and Chargers game. I don't know if those are necessarily winnable games, but you go out there and you give it your best. I think at this point you're playing for pride. I think you don't want to hand Seattle a draft pick that's in the top 5 if you can avoid it. And so the more wins you stack now, the better chance you have at that. And I think that's kind of how you motivate yourself. Some guys have individual motivations, contracts, performance bonuses, things like that. But I think you just go out and play the best football you can and see where the chips may fall at the end of the season and kind of go from there.
I really liked a couple of things from this game. First of all, I like the commitment to the run. Mm-hmm. And I think some of that had to do with Andrew Beck being back. It's amazing how that hasn't really been a topic. We haven't really spent a lot of time on missing the fullback. But when they had Andrew Beck in there, they were a better running team. And this was their best rushing performance of the season. And I love what Latavius Murray said after the game, we committed to it. We trusted it. Mm-hmm. We stayed the course. You get two-yard runs, you get 3-yard runs. You don't give up on it just because all of a sudden you get frustrated that you're not getting the explosive runs there. And eventually they did start building in some bigger runs. And Latavius had some of those out there. So I think that there's lessons in every single game. So you and we'll talk about every single game, win or lose, because there's a lot of lessons. And I think one of the biggest lessons in this is trying to find some patience, especially when you have a game plan that you believe in.
Well, I think that's something you and I have talked about on the radio show, is don't get away from things that are working necessarily. And let things play out. Have more patience with things, And I thought they did a good job mixing it up. I thought they did a good job of staying patient. You don't want to be predictable by doing the same thing over and over again. But if it's working, hey, keep running it. And Latavius Murray going for a Bill 30 on the ground. I mean, you get the FedEx nominee for ground player of the week, all that kind of stuff. I thought, to me, and he's absolutely right on the on the patience with the run game stuff. To me, the most poignant moment of the presser was when he's talking about never having received a game ball in the locker room before, and he's just kind of reflecting on 10 years in the league and still checking boxes, And so I think Latavius Murray and Marlon Mack, I think they both played well. I'd like to see more out of Mack or at least get more reps because I think he's the more explosive of the two. I think they just wore Arizona down with Murray, and they just kept doing it because they were so worn down.
But that's what's so valuable. I mean, even when you do have Russell Wilson in there, and again, it's not like you don't want to be a prolific passing team, mm-hmm. but you got to build off something, mm-hmm. right? And you see like the Tennessee Titans, for example. Like, what they're going to do, mm-hmm. and they're going to do that every single game. And guess what? There's a reason why they continue to win games. Now, I know they didn't win this last weekend, but the point being, they do win games. They won the AFC South. They're going to win the AFC South again this season, probably. Mm. And, unless Jacksonville catches them. And they, of course, were the number 1 seed in the AFC last year for a reason, because they can lean on their run when all things are breaking down, whenever the passing game isn't quite coming together like they want. Guess what? They have a running attack. And so for the Broncos, this is just something that we go back to from the very beginning of the season, saying, what did you need to start out the season with? What could you have built on? And you could have built on that. You could have built on concepts in the running game that would have given you some advantages when you wanted to go to play action. And guess what? When they wanted to go to play action yesterday, it was great. Mm-hmm. It was fantastic. And it was Brett Rippon's best friend when he could sit there and go play action and roll on the boots. It was because you were wearing down that defensive line for Arizona that you did have those successes. So it's a long game thing. You can't get into the game and say, well, we ran on first down and it didn't work, so guess what? We're going to pass for the next 15 straight plays. Right. And that's what the Broncos have done too many times this year.
Yeah, and they've gotten away from the things that they need to do to be successful. I think, and you know me, I feel like halftime adjustments is an overblown statement because you got like 8 minutes in there. You're not going to really get anything adjusted. But this team came out in the second half and looked different.
It was a different game.
The first half was a little flat. And they came out in the second half and they looked different. And I don't know what it was in that halftime. I don't know what it was that went on in there. But when they came back out, they were a different football team and took over that game. Part of that, I think, was the injury to McCoy and having McSorley out there. But it was before that they even looked like a different football team.
I'm 100% with you. And that's, again, things we learned, right, over the course of the season. Learn who you are, learn what you're about, learn how you can get better. And you're right, it was a 6-3 game at half. Of course, I mean, that included a 38-yard miss from Brandon McManus. That doesn't happen very often. Mm-hmm. But you were a 6-3. It was a 6-3 game. It became a 9-3 game. And you were thinking, okay, well, this is what happens when you have a backup playing quarterback. And then suddenly, because of the run,
Frampton came alive.
Frampton came alive. Nice. And I also want to give a little bit of tip of the cap to Jerry Jeudy, who stacked a nice performance. Again, it's not a 3-touchdown performance, but 7 catches for 76 yards. He was clearly wide receiver 1 for this team. He made some big catches in big moments, some big third down conversions, and that's what wide receiver 1 does, right? I mean, even when other teams say, I'm not really worried about the rest of these guys, I just got to stop this guy, guess what? You still have production.
Yeah, and I really do think that the future of this football team is going to be with Jerry Jeudy in the X. Cortland Sutton is a heavy slot player, and Tim Patrick also on the outside. He'll rotate in and out. But I do think that the future of this offense is going to change a little bit. I think they've discovered something by flopping Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out.
No doubt about it. All right, so from this game, I guess a couple more lessons that we learned, certainly on the defensive side of the ball. Justin Simmons continues to be a ball hawk, right place, right time. The first interception, by the way, great work by Alex Singleton, who was able to get the pressure on Colt McCoy, who ended up floating the ball a little bit, got the interception. The second one was just a really bad throw. It looked like, I think it was A.J. Green just gave up on the route. And so that's Justin Simmons just being in the right place, right time. Reading the quarterback, reading Trace McSorley, and put himself in position. Patrick Tan got an interception. We're starting to see, and this is what happens when it comes to turnovers, you start to see them in bunches. Yep. Right? You start to see, it starts to stack. You start to see confidence, and the guys start to go, oh, okay, all right. I'm seeing things, and teams are starting to press a little bit. And guess what? You put the Arizona Cardinals, I understand, they were dealing with a lot of injuries. Mm-hmm. They still had, by the way, their starting caliber wide receivers without Rondale Moore. They still had Marquise Brown. They still had DeAndre Hopkins, all the people out there being like, oh, they did, this team wasn't very good. Well, it's like, well, still have a lot of talent. The point being here is that you force them to have to go outside of what they wanted to do, which is to run James Conner. Mm-hmm. That's what they wanted to. They wanted to stick to that. They want to stick to short, very efficient passes. And you forced them to have to go downfield, and that's what happens. Yeah,
and that's how you win football games. Take teams out of what they want to do and put them in situations they aren't very good at, and that's how you beat them, whether they're a good team, whether they're a bad team. And I thought they did a good job. I think they need to stack another win on this. I think you need to for the team's sake. It's not put it all in one game. I think you need to beat the Rams, stack that, kind of get that back-to-back wins, get some confidence going into next year, and then you could start doing the last 2 games. You can kind of start doing the let's evaluate the roster stuff. Which I think they should do at this point. I think that's where you are. You don't want to risk some kind of injury to a Surtain or a Simmons at this point when there's nothing to play for. So,
see, I don't know, man. I don't know. You got the Kansas City Chiefs. You got the LA Chargers. These are division games. You could split with the Chargers.
You'll play the first half against those teams. Okay, and if you're in it, then you'll keep going. But if you're not in it, then
that's an interesting debate. I'm not saying I completely disagree because you are with a firm eye on the 2023 season, but snapping the streak against the Kansas City Chiefs, again, that seems like outrageous right now. But just for argument's sake, you just watch the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Houston Texans, who's going to have the #1 overall pick, and the Texans took them to overtime. In fact, the Texans got the ball back in overtime, fumbled it.
Had the opportunity.
Had the opportunity.
And this week was just a crazy week.
It was a wild week. Yeah,
I'm not even getting into that Raiders ending.
Yeah, the Raiders ending, the Jags ending. Yeah, it was just the Minnesota Vikings game, like all of it. Like it was just what a weekend. And so, but the point being is that's an interesting debate about sort of diagnosing, assessing your roster versus trying to actually win games against division opponents, even though it's meaningless as record. It's not meaningless to the organization in the locker room.
Performance bonuses, players, and there's an added component here, head coach, that's probably coaching for his job and is probably going to want the best chance he has at winning those games out there. So you may get some pushback there.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fascinating sort of finish. But of course, they got the LA Rams coming up. We'll spend a good portion of the rest of the week. Steve Atwater's gonna be with us tomorrow or later on this week. So we'll break that all down. Any other thoughts? Final thoughts from the Broncos win over the Arizona Cardinals?
No, I thought it was a good team win. I thought they spread the ball around. I thought Brett Rippon had a good game. The only area that I really would circle as not being where it needed to be was the offensive line. Yeah. And they were in shambles because of injury, but it was wildly not good. And so that's going to have to be something that when it comes up on tape, they're going to be the ones taking the brunt of it this week.
Boy, if you want to know the value and importance of Quinn Miners, now we already knew that because he got knocked out after the first game, and they'd been kind of trying to figure out, is Graham Glasgow over there for a little bit, whatever. But now with Graham Glasgow playing center, you want to know who the MVP of that offensive line is. It's very clearly Quinn Miners, and just how different they were and how different they functioned, especially in pass pro. But even in run blocking at times was a little bit of a rough go. But pass pro, man. Without Quinn Miners was tough. Yeah,
J.J. Watt might have gotten himself to the Pro Bowl in that game.
Well, I know. I sort of tweeted out like at halftime, J.J. Watt was already the NFC Defensive Player of the Week. And
right.
I mean, he had what 3 sacks in the game and a forced fumble.
Yeah, and it was and that's without their best pass rusher, and Zach Allen wasn't even normally opposite him wasn't even in the game, so he was inactive all day. So. Just some things to keep an eye on. That offensive line needs work. They're going to have to get this offseason, they're going to have to make a real commitment to the offensive line and a real commitment to a little bit more speed at the receiver position.
All right. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.
Denver's going to win! You can stand up and salute in Denver, and you got the world champions that live in your town.